and they build cases. And by the way, after 20 years, can you build a big case? And a rational realist, too, is very good as far as memory is concerned. And they tend to be able to drag it up for 20 years ago, word for word. All right, let's assume that she's an affectionate helper, an assistant. You come in and she said, "Where were you, honey?" You said, "I had to make a sale." The man came in from back east. "Why didn't you call?" "Well, I called twice and the line was just tied up, and then I forgot all about it. I got carried away in the presentation." "Can anybody else down in that office take these night calls?" "Well, I suppose they could, but nobody was around." "Well, you won't let it happen again, will you?" "Well, try not to." You sort of get the feeling, in other words, it's questioning, it's working you over, but it's not the nth degree. Now let's assume that she happens to be an ideal individual. You come in at 2 o'clock, she meets you at the door, kisses you, without saying a word, takes your shoes off, puts slippers on, says, "I kept the food hot in the oven. You must be tired." She leads you to the kitchen, brings out the hot food. Meantime, she's taken your coat. While you're sitting down to eat, she goes behind your back and begins to massage the back of your neck. She says, "Your neck's tight. Boy, you did work hard tonight." She says, "I'll tell you what I'll do. While you finish eating, I'll go pour your bath water." So she goes and gets the bath water. She gets it extra hot so he can really relax. She thinks, he's probably extra special tonight, worked so hard. He hasn't said he worked yet. She realizes she's got some special, whatever this bubble bath is that she's been saving for herself, and she thinks this would be a special treat for him. Puts that in the water. She goes back in the kitchen. She says, "Your bath water's ready." She says, "I think you're the greatest guy in the world." By the way, he's not a bit surprised at this behavior, because this is what's been going on for 20 years. Then she says, "If you feel like it, after you take your bath, I'll give you the best loving you've ever had." Now, after they go to sleep that night, has she once wanted to know where he's been? Not once did she ask. Now, if he wants to tell her, can he? That's his prerogative if he would like to tell her, but does he have to tell her? Now, I call that the belief level. And ideal individuals have a tendency to have everybody around them on the belief level. Let's try it with children. Let's say you come home and you tell your children, "We've got to go somewhere in 10 minutes. If they're on the confidence level, the administrative assistant, they'll say, "Do we have to?" Have you ever heard those remarks? You say, "Yes." "Do you think it's the right night?" "Yes." "We can't get ready that quick." "Well, I'll help you." "We couldn't find our clothes." "I'll find your clothes. Go ahead and get in the bathtub real quick." "You'll never find the shoes." "Yes, I'll find your shoes." "It won't do you much good because if you do, they'll be muddy." "I'll polish them." "Okay, if you say so, we'll try to get ready in 10 minutes. Now, that's a child on the confidence level. Trying to give you a little insight tonight to find out where your children are. By the way, if you're an ideal individual, your children tend to be ideal individuals. Now, it's impossible to be an ideal individual, generally speaking, under 30. If you're under 30 tonight, you probably are not an ideal individual. It takes about 30 years to conquer fear. That's if you're fighting full-time. So children will never reach that, but it's possible for them to go on the belief level to an ideal individual. If you come home and say to the children, "We have to go somewhere in 10 minutes," now on the belief level, what do they think of you? Everything he says, he means, and everything he means has good reasons, and we do whatever he says. If you have people on the belief level and you say jump, there could only be one question. How high? There couldn't be any other way to approach the subject. All right, let's go down a little further. The emotions of our administrative assistant are soft emotions, tender emotions. And these emotions sometimes, even though they appear soft, are their method of controlling people. And we call this emotional coercion. Now, how does this work? Well, the wife cries, or pouts, or maneuvers, or breaks out in hives, or threatens to kill herself. And she normally goes however far she has to go until the guy jumps. It's a method of forcing people to do something. Now, there is another type of control here we should mention as we pass. Sometimes a person who is in a good chain of command will use positional authority. And he'll be backed by his male role, strong, and therefore he'll feel he can do it. All right, let's look at the fears that we find from our assistant group. Anytime you would complain or criticize them, would you scare them to death? Judging, criticism, complaining. And here's the reason. The 4A's is their area. In other words, they never go up into the top 3A's. Now, their God, which we're going to talk a little later about, is the group. And they are very interested in the group giving them the 4A's, which is acknowledgement, acceptance, approval, and appreciation. Now, what do you suppose they'll do to receive these 4A's? Anything. They make comments. What will they think? This is what we call the big they. This is their God. What will they say? They're very much interested in this because they feel like if they will not accept them, will they lose their 4A's? Under stress, I like to refer to this group as the mother-hen retreat. If there's a shrill noise and the mother hen's out here with her little chickens, what do the chickens do? Under those wings. Are they safe? Nothing can ever hurt them. All right, now under stress, what do you suppose an administrative assistant does? Well, he normally has a mother hen, and he runs underneath those wings for safety. Let's look at the occupations. Teachers. Little junior gives this teacher a bad time. And the teacher cries. And she walks down the hall to whose office? The mother hen. The principal tells her it'll be all right. We've had other juniors before. They have passed, and we'll handle this one. Social workers, they have a welfare man who's in charge. The Peace Corps, it's set up beautifully with an overseer. A housewife, they come crying on their husband's shoulder. And he tells them everything's going to be all right. And they say, that's wonderful. It's consoling, isn't it? Salesmen. Now do you know why we need sales managers? Every time somebody gets a little rough with them, they come back to the sales manager and he puts them together again. Sends them out into the big bad world. Nurses. What would a nurse be without a doctor? Slightest thing the patient says, what's the nurse do? Runs to the doctor. This patient is not acting right today. Secretaries. The average secretary would not know what to do if the boss is gone a week. Now we have some other groups in here. Middle management all falls in this group. The clergy, the humanitarian type clergy falls in this group. Went down the list with a salesman on this administrative assistant. I think we should go down the list as far as a wife is concerned. And there's a reason for this, because we find the average American male would prefer his wife to be an administrative assistant. And I think if I describe her as an administrative assistant, it'll become very plain why the man wants this. Personally, I don't. I think my wife should be an ideal individual. I want to be able to come home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, if your wife is an administrative assistant, you won't be able to come home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Remember our story? She said, don't let it ever happen again. Now, if this is true, why does the average American man want his wife to be an administrative assistant? Well, let's go through it and show you. If a wife she believes in favors. You do this for me, I do this for you. Is that similar to our salesman originally? We have to have these people over for dinner. Why? Not this week. It has to be this week. It can't go a day beyond. You begin to question why. Obligation. Do you realize how long it's been since they invited us to their house? Now, the obligation, will that come ahead of her headship? Her husband's tired. I mean, he should go to bed. No sense in having him have a heart attack. But what do they do that night? They call up the people to whom they have an obligation. Could you come over for dinner tomorrow night? We just love to have you. We say then that the female begins to put allegiance to other people other than her head. Now, I'd like for you to visualize this man and his wife in bed sleeping. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's sound asleep. There's a little rustle noise in the bushes, and she screams. She wakes him up out of his sound sleep. Now, his first job is to get her arms and legs off of him. We call this clinging. Under stress, she clings to him. Now, he's loose. He gets up and he goes over to the window and he sees it's a puppy. So he gets the dog out of the way and he comes back and he says, I saw a shadow of a man, but he saw my shadow and he ran. She says, my hero. She says, no wonder I feel so secure in this house when you're here. Now, do you know why he would like to have an administrative assistant for a while? A little tiny mouse runs across the floor. Total weight, 2 1/4 ounces. Woman standing on the chair screaming, total weight, 119 and a half. The husband kills the mouse. He walks over to the chair. Now watch the strategy here. Watch the physical position of her. She's up on a chair. Now as he puts his arms up to take her off of the chair, has she maneuvered him into an embrace? Has he proven he's a man? He's killed 2 1/4 ounces. He has built up a self-image great in her eyes, and we'll get into this when we talk about the Queen of the Universe. Does she crave a hero anyway? What a strategy. Now, it doesn't have to be a mouse. It could be something of less weight. It could be a spider. But the point is, why does he want her to be this way? Oh, you can carry it all away. Here's a little worm. Well, got to put on this hook. As soon as she takes his insurance money, buys a new fishing pole. By the way, she likes to fish now. He at least taught her that much. Now he's under the ground. Who puts the worm on the hook? She doesn't have any problems whatsoever. Spiders don't bother her now. Mice don't bother her anymore. Unless she remarries, and then she regresses back to her fear. Because she has to do something to make a man out of this guy. And so she does it by regressing. And you can't tell me that she's really afraid. Which would you like to have tonight? An ideal individual for your wife who could care less and fear nothing. Wouldn't leave much room, though, for you if you weren't an ideal individual, would it? You'd be up on the chair and she would be killing the spider. And that will not work because she's not strong enough to catch you in the embrace as you come down off of the chair. Now, the goals of this particular group, they are loyal to either of two things. One, either a leader or a group. Now, is this group good? We cannot tell you whether this group is good or bad unless we know who their leader is. Did Mussolini have administrative assistants? Yes, he did. In other words, are you beginning to see that rational realists and aggressive fighters have administrative assistants? Therefore, we say that you as administrative assistant are just as valuable as the cause or the leader to which you have lined up with. If your head is no good, then your loyalty is doing what? The more loyal you become, the worse you become because you're pushing a wrong cause. I can't tell you how good administrative assistant is until you show me who their boss is. Let's move on to the ideal individual. To me, this is the thing we're looking for. This is what we all want to become. And let's go down the list. They believe in the top 3 A's: admiration, adoration, and affection. And by the way, our percentages on this person are 5%. This is our only crucial group of people. I would believe that if we would lower this percentage to less than 3%, the society would be in danger. I read the other day where Russia's running right at 3% and the United States is running 5%. And these are the figures that I would look at a lot closer than who's going to get to the moon first. So we say then that should our society be more interested in this group than any other group? This is the group that we should really be trying to help. Let's go back to the fighter group. If we need more policemen, how can we get them tonight? What do you suppose would happen if we raised the wages just $10 a month? We would have an actual diagram of demand and supply, and you could predict a corresponding increase in number of men who would go down to be policemen. All right, now what if you wanted to increase the ideal individual column? And you had all the money you wanted to offer. Could you offer enough money to increase this group? There's no money in the world that will increase this group. This group comes by actually growth, and they are what they are, and money cannot increase the number in the group. Our creativeness comes out of this group. Our direction, our guidance comes out of this group. During World War II, some historians believe that Winston Churchill, as an ideal individual, was the only one reason that they can account for England not going under. Just begin to show you the importance of having just a few of these people around. I'll give you a story of an ideal individual. Contrast it with a rational realist. He's out in the South Pacific, and he's encountering some new things in World War II that's not in the rule book. I'd like for you to figuratively see him standing on the deck of his little destroyer with the rule book. We do it this way. We do it this way. We do it this way. The ship sinks. You got the image? All right, now let's replace the rational realist with an ideal individual. He's got the same book. He's standing on the same deck of the same destroyer. We do it this way. We throw the book in the ocean. We do it this way. Now, where does his third maneuver come from? His head. He's making it up now as he goes. He has no fear. Now, he's on the same deck of the same ship coming in underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. Big smile on his face from ear to ear. Now, you want to know why his ship's coming into San Francisco? That's where his court-martial is. He's being court-martialed for writing his own rule book. They can't court-martial the other guy who followed the rules. He's in the bottom of the ocean. Now the court reporter is sitting there writing madly the events of this particular happening. For what purpose? World War III. We have to have a new rule book, don't we? Is there any fear in the ideal individual? No, he faces his court-martial as if it was another part of life. If he had it to do over again, what would he do? Same thing. I want you to fall in love with this individual, and I want to describe him in such a way that you can see how wonderful he is. And I want you to pattern your life in this direction. His view of other people. One of the things he believes in is the law of fair exchange. And since he believes in the law of fair exchange, he believes in negotiating. Now, he believes that you don't give anybody anything. This is a very interesting concept because he believes that if I give you something, will I destroy you? Yes, in other words, if I give you something without you having any way to repay me, have I eliminated the law of fair exchange? What have I done to your individuality, your own uniqueness, and your own value you place upon yourself? I've destroyed it. So he would give you something, but he would give you an opportunity so you could earn something or so you could pay it back. Now the next thing that's interesting about an ideal individual, the people around him are on a belief level. And I would say an ideal individual should have his children on a belief level probably by the age of 3, maybe 4. And by the way, an employee would either be on the belief level or be terminated. Now what do I mean by the belief level? The belief level means that when you ask somebody to do something and it doesn't make a bit of sense, there's no rhyme, no reason, and what does he do? He does it perfectly, and he must believe in you to the point where he believes that you wouldn't tell him to do it unless you had a good reason. So he trusts you so much that he does anything you ask without any question. We'd say, this is marvelous, then. Can I really move effectively in goal-oriented behavior? The boss comes in and he says, do this, and do this, and you say, why? Then after 3 hours, he's got it all explained, why. Then you start to do it, and he says, there's no sense doing it now, it's too late. You say, well, that's wonderful. If you ever ask me again, at least in this particular area, I'll be able to do it because now I know why. What a boss. What a situation. This is the secret of success of being a leader. They believe in you so much that they really do not have to know why. What do you suppose in your relationship with God that he eventually would like to bring you to what level? Would he want you on this belief level? You suppose he'll keep working and working and working until finally you arrive? Could you short-circuit the whole thing by jumping to that level to everybody that's got a mail roll over you tonight? Could you solve a lot of headaches of people who have the authority over you tonight if you would just immediately jump to the belief level even if you didn't believe in them? He believes in firmness. And we'll discuss this when we discuss the male role. As we discuss the male role, you will see that it is the ideal individual we're talking about all night anyway. There are not very many of them. Most of them have arrived in the world almost entirely through fathers. What I mean by that is almost all the ideal individuals, if you really want to find out why they're ideal, you go back and look at their father. This is almost always the case of why they end up that way. The reason for that is to be an ideal individual, do you almost have to have something to look at to find out what it is? And if your father was an ideal individual, is it almost normal for you to be one? But if you didn't have even an uncle around that was an ideal individual, what's your odds of you being one? Not very good. So one of the greatest things that a father can give his children is to be an ideal individual so they've got a pattern. If they can have some kind of a pattern to follow, then you can have more hope for them. And several women come for counseling. They want to know, do you think I really can raise my children alone? No. You will, but will there always be something just a little bit missing? In other words, it takes two images for a child to mature psychologically sound, both the male and the female. He has everybody around him in a unity relationship, and he believes in the 7 A's. And he also is on the divine level from our first session, and we call him on the divine power level. He's an individual with infinite power. When he plays the female role, he plays it perfectly. We say this individual is in perfect submission to his head. He's an absolute slave to his head. And then there's something I think unique about him. Of all of the 5 groups, he's the only group that has humor. Why do you suppose the other 4 groups do not have any humor? Well, they're too busy. They're behind the 8 ball. They're solving a crisis. And is there anything funny in the middle of a crisis? In other words, we say that they are so over-concerned with their big problems that they don't have time to find anything funny. Another interesting thing about the ideal individual, he has interests. Interest in people. There was a publication on Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And this publication was outlining his knowledge of the little people around him. The man who drove the car, the elevator operator. I could go on and on naming you dozens of people that he met in his life. He knew their first name. He knew their wife's name. He knew all the children's names. He would get on the elevator and he'd say, "How's Johnny's sore throat?" Now, how did he have time to do this? He was running the country. Well, we say that the ideal individual, since he doesn't have to spend 99% of his time fighting fear like the rest of the groups, does he have a lot of spare time? And he tends to know all the details about the humans around him. I have one individual in one of my seminars from one of the local firms, and he told me this story. He worked downtown Portland in a parking lot, and he worked there for about 4 or 5 years. He said he could spot a president almost immediately. In other words, a man who was really an executive. He said he would come in, he would call me by my first name. He'd know my wife's name. He'd begin to find out all about the children. He knew all about my whole life. He said I could sure spot middle management. He said they rushed. He said as far as they were concerned, I was a machine that parked the car. He said they didn't even recognize me as human. They didn't call me by name. In fact, sometimes they didn't even look at me or speak to me. There's something happen to you from middle management before you go into upper management. He also said that middle management always tried to appear to be big. So they always had an air about them. And when the guy finally reached the top, he could care less what you thought about him. He was a relaxed type individual. Now this was such a contrast to him that he has carried this attitude with him as he's working in this firm. He's trying to develop himself like top management. In other words, he's trying to do this relaxed behavior. Now, in order to do this, you've got to eliminate fear. Because if you're scared to death, will you have time to ask the elevator operator his name? What have you been thinking about all the time you're going up the elevator? I have an appointment this morning. What am I going to say? How are we going to handle that situation? Wished I had the day off. This is a horrible thing. How am I ever going to make it? And as you're going up, there's a man standing there who's running the elevator. Who's he?